Hi, I'm Martin, and this is Change from the Centre. So there have been two really important documents for the government published in the last couple of days. The first one is the Milburn report, which was published today, which I'm not going to talk about. And the reason for that is it's about younger people. It's called the lost generation. It's about the number of people that are not in employment, education, or training, and the potential growth. And it's an indicator of basically failure of this government and the last one. The reason I'm not going to talk about it is because next week I'm planning on doing something which is about the need for more older people to start looking at our political system through the eyes of younger people. And I think it's something that's really, really important, because I think when you start to do it, I've started to try to do this because I recognize I'm getting on in years, and that unless I start doing this, actually things become lost and certain issues become lost. So that's to come next week, and I'll bring the Milburn report into that. What I am going to talk about today is the report that Tony Blair published yesterday, and I'll put a link in the comments in the description for this, about the lack of focus that the Labour Party has got. Now, whenever Blair speaks, one of the things you get, mostly from the right, mostly from the left, sorry, but from across the whole spectrum, is "but Iraq." And people are absolutely right in that Iraq was Blair's biggest failure. However, Tony Blair was Prime Minister for 10 years. He won 3 general elections, including one after the Iraq War, by the way. And during his period as Prime Minister, he never had a single recession. So it was a constant period of growth. That says to me that this is somebody that when he speaks, we ought to listen to. And so today I'm just going to analyze some of what he said and where I agree and disagree with it. So the Blair report, which is actually entitled "The Labour Party is Playing with Fire Over Its Future and the Future of the Country," is quite hard-hitting, and probably deservedly so. And it basically covers 2 areas. It talks about international relationships, where it talks about why Trump behaves like he does, and the Trump government, but also he talks about the inevitable move that there's going to be towards rejoining the EU. And he says that we should not do that, at least until we can negotiate from a position of strength. And at the moment, his view is that we can't. And he's probably right about that, because I don't think we would get back into the EU on the same terms that we did before. And therefore, we need to be able to negotiate and have a position of strength, so that we can actually, at the very least, achieve that, if not more. The other part of the report is about domestic politics, although it does touch onto international affairs as well. In particular, there's a big focus on the need for government to rethink itself as far as AI is concerned. Basically, it's saying that AI is going to happen, and we shouldn't stand in the way and talk about if. We should accept it's going to happen and move forward on that basis. But what he also does is criticize the political centre ground. He calls the centre ground but basic political management. He uses the phrase radical centre, which I really, really like. And what he means by the radical centre is that the centre ground of British politics shouldn't be doing that management. It shouldn't be playing politics. It should be being radical from a centre ground perspective. And that is a lot of what Change from the Centre is about. It is about the need for political change, and fundamental political change from the centre ground. And he makes exactly the same point that I do, that unless that happens, then power is going to be ceded to the left or the right. And the way he puts it is that people want leadership in politics and not management. And where they see management in the centre ground, they will move to the extremes. And he cites examples from across Europe where that has happened. But he also cites examples of where clear leadership on the issues has been shown from the centre, where the countries have elected centre ground governments. And he talks about France as an example of that. And so a lot of what he says makes a great deal of sense. I think there are flaws in it. He doesn't talk enough, from my perspective, about the need for political reorganization, although he does touch on it a little bit. He talks about the fact that we need to do politics less and policy more, and that policy should come first. And I think that is absolutely right, because the way we are at the moment, the politics is destroying us. That's what destroyed the Conservative Party, and it is what is currently destroying the Labour Party. So what Blair did with his report, at the end of it, he provided a summary of 10 things that the government need to do. And I'm going to go through these, but I'm going to start with my criticism of those 10 things, which fundamentally is, I don't think they're radical enough. If there is truly to be a radical centre within British politics, it needs to be about far more than this. It is my view. But that radicalism could come out of this. So I'm going to go through these and provide a bit of comment on them. Number one is that government needs to be enabling as far as the private sector's move towards AI is concerned. This is absolutely right. He talks, it needs to be enabling. It needs to make sure that the use of AI has as little bureaucracy, government bureaucracy attached to it as possible, because we need AI to work in this country, and we need it to work better than it works elsewhere. And the best way of doing that is for government to get its backside out of it, being blunt about it. He talks about even more radical planning reform. Now, he acknowledges in the report that the government have made some important changes to planning, but he then talks about going even further. And much as I think he's right, I don't think there's a massive public appetite for it. Some of the current planning reform has had some criticism from the public and from voters, and I think this probably at this precise moment would be a step too far, although it'd be nice to see it done. We must prioritise cheaper energy and electrification over net zero. Now, this to me is a dig at the Ed Miliband agenda, and I think it's absolutely right. I think we should go back to drilling for oil. We should go back to extracting gas. Absolutely, we should. I've talked about this in the past, about my vision for a sovereign green fund, which basically would use the revenue from North Sea gas and North Sea oil to fund a massive uplift in green infrastructure in the UK. So things like solar on every home that would benefit from solar, putting solar onto car park roofs or onto car parks is an example which a lot of people cry out for, but also giving more impetus to things like wave power and tide power, which we've never quite got there, although we are getting closer and closer, is my understanding. So I think he's right about this. New partnership for apprenticeships and training. And he talks about for the whole workforce, not just for younger people. This is absolutely right. We hear these figures about people changing careers, 3, 4, 5, I think 7. I've heard of people changing careers 7 times during their working life. And yet it's getting harder and harder to reskill. And I've used this example before, but I did an university degree in 2010, totally self-funded. I could not afford to do that now because the cost of OU degrees has gone through the roof. So a good example, I think. Reindustrializing the North through first-class infrastructure, education, and a number of other things. Absolutely right. And again, my criticism would be that we need to reindustrialize and revitalise not just the north of England, but whole areas of deprivation wherever they exist in the UK. And, you know, it shames this country that we could take a map of deprivation from 40 years ago, and we could sit a map of deprivation today alongside it and see very, very little difference. And I do believe, and I've talked a lot about this in the past, that it is infrastructure and education that are absolutely at the heart of the solutions to our deprivation problems. A plan for fundamental reform over time of welfare. I think everybody's signed up to this. What it looks like is another matter, but we certainly cannot be in a position where in a few years' time we have a welfare budget that is bigger than our defence budget. So we do need to revisit it, and we need to start thinking about what we're doing around mental health. And that's partly, I think, where the issue about prevention within the NHS is important. So let's move on to that. Whole system healthcare reform, moving from cure to prevention, mixing private and public provision in a fundamental realignment of the two. This goes back to Blair's agenda when he was in government. I'm not sure there is yet the appetite for this. I think for certainly the private and public provision merging. But I do think the move to a proper national health service. I used to say when I was a councillor that we had a national treatment service, not a national health service, and we do need to change that. Some of that is happening. Whatever it takes, action to solve the illegal immigration issue. I think everybody agrees that we have to be a country that is seen to be in control of immigration. We seem to be moving and making progress on it. Whether it's enough progress and whether people are bought into the fact that there is progress is another matter. So 9 and 10 are sort of aligned, reorganising the whole of government around the harnessing of the 21st century technological revolution. That, of course, is a reference to AI, and it's absolutely right that government needs to make AI work for government and for the people in the same way that business has to make it right and work for business. And so it's absolutely fundamental that we have to accept AI as important to our future. And linked to that, a reimagined state in which taxes and spending can be lower, productivity higher, and government seen as enabling, not directing. That sort of is, in my view, motherhood and apple pie. But he also talks about political consensus behind a radical restructuring of the state, including a new cadre of workforce. And I think that is related to having a workforce that would enable us to make AI work for it. I also think it harked back to Blair's time as Prime Minister when he described himself as still having the scars on the back from having to deal with the civil service. And I think there's a reference to that. So there's a lot in here. Whether it's radical enough, whether it shows enough of a radical centre to capture the imagination of the public, I'm not sure. The thing that's missing from it in a big way is restructuring of our political system. And I think without that, all of this is nothing, because we don't have a political system that works for the 21st century. That may be what bullet point 9 is about when he talks about reorganising the whole of government. It may be what he was referencing. If it was, he should have been more explicit about it. But, you know, the things that change from the centre are absolutely about is this reorganisation of the state with the centre ground driving the change. And that's talking about proportional representation, talking about a written constitution and a restructuring from top to bottom of our political system. So looking at regional government, reform of the House of Lords and how that should look. And he doesn't talk about that at all. And it is fundamental to that if we are to move forward as a country, we need to fix our broken political system. And yes, that does mean putting policy before politics, which Blair calls for, but it also means political restructuring. Once again, thank you very much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And I repeat what I often say. This is my views, my thoughts around what I think is a very important essay. I would finish by saying this isn't an essay just for the Labour Party. The Conservatives should be absolutely all over this. They should be looking at this point that Blair talks about apprenticeships and training, the point he talks about reskilling, about education and infrastructure. That should be at the heart of what the Conservative Party are talking about. And that would be a proper one nationist Conservative Party with a real drive to create aspirational young people that are an asset to the country from day one, which most people are, by the way, but not enough. Once again, thanks for listening. If you disagree with me, please just make a comment. I always reply to comments. There's the odd one I perhaps wouldn't. It depends on the tone of them. But if it's a bullet point where you disagree with me and say where you will, I will reply. But thank you very much for your time again.